have already provoked controversy over the lack of white nominees. But now the contents of the goodie bag, which will be handed out to many of those attending, has also provoked a row. Its contents are said to be worth around £150,000 and include a year's worth of car rentals, a lifetime supply of upmarket skincare, and a £39,000 10-day first-class trip to Israel. Artists for Palestine UK has called on actors and directors on the Oscars shortlist to give up their all-expenses-paid trip to Israel to a Palestinian refugee. The film director Ken Loach is among those who thinks the stars who are given the trip should turn it down. I asked him why people shouldn't visit Israel.
Israel has been oppressing the Palestinians for 70 years. They steal their land, they destroy their houses, they kill them with impunity. They break international law, they disregard United Nations resolutions, and they break the Geneva Conventions. They're constructing an apartheid state. And I think to have an all-expenses first-class travel paid in those circumstances is pretty disgusting.
You can object to Israel's occupation of the West Bank, to settlements that are defined as illegal under international law, but that's not the same as an apartheid state. That's a very serious and particular accusation to be levelled against Israel.
Absolutely. And I think a lot of people are seeing it as an apartheid state now. If you look in the West Bank, for example, you'll see settlements that are only available to Israeli Jews. The Palestinians live in villages at the foot of those settlements. You'll see roads that only Israelis can travel on. The Palestinians in their own land cannot travel on those roads. You'll see checkpoints that only Palestinians are forced to go through. Israelis don't have to go through checkpoints. It's separate developments, and it satisfies the United Nations definition of apartheid.
Well, there are those who would argue that the Arabs of Israel are full citizens. They have the right to vote. There are Israeli Arab MPs sitting in the Israeli parliament. But if you feel so strongly, and this is your view, then why would you object to other people visiting Israel to see for themselves?
And will they be going to the West Bank? Will they go to Gaza and see the rubble? Will they see the schools that were bombed by Israel in 2014? Will they see the hospitals that were targeted by Israel? Will they see the places where families were herded together and then executed? Will they hear about the people who were asked if they spoke Hebrew, and if they spoke Hebrew, they were executed? I think what they'll see is they won't see the real face of Israel. That's the problem.
But many people would argue the real face of Israel is a democratic country that is defending itself against all kinds of attack and suspicion. No country is perfect. If you have a critique of a country, isn't it better to go and see it for yourself? Many of us travel to places where we don't agree with all the politics.
It's a democratic country that is breaking international law, and all the Palestinians ask for is observe the law. Give us the rule of law. And I think what makes Israel special is that it is supported by the US, it's supported by the UK. There are arms deals with Israel which support this breach of international law. And I think that's not acceptable. So what is civil society to do in the face of that when your politicians support illegality? And I think the answer is, and many people are now coming to the conclusion that the only answer is a boycott of Israeli goods called for by Palestinians, and to support the boycott of academic and cultural institutions that are supported by the state, not individuals. This is not about a blacklist of individuals. This is a call for a boycott in the interest of the rule of law.
But many others would argue that Israel is a democratic country that has a right to exist, and therefore a boycott is not justified, and also the economic damage it might do would also affect the thousands of Palestinians who work within Israel.
It's funny, Israel doesn't use that justification when it's claiming or calling for a boycott with Iran, isn't it? And there's sanctions against Russia. Israel is, as I've said, it is ignoring international law. Why doesn't it just remove those illegal settlements? Why doesn't it end the apartheid structures that it's putting in place?
The film director Ken Loach. Well, Naama Kaplan is the director of the Israel Government Tourist Office for the UK and Ireland. She says the Israeli government isn't behind the prize being offered in the Oscars goodie bag, and argues that the campaign of boycott, divestment and sanctions against Israel, or BDS, is fundamentally opposed to the country. I asked her what anyone taking up the Oscars trip would see on a visit to Israel.
The invitation is purely for people to come and see and witness it for itself. People can choose where to go within Israel or within the Palestinian Authority. They can visit and see without the barrier of the media, without the barrier of having opinions as the one we've had before of what Israel is really about.
But What do you say, though, to somebody like Ken Loach, who argues that the Palestinians have been oppressed? Anybody visiting Israel on a first-class trip is only going to see the best bits of the country. They're not going to see the things that many people might choose to criticise, many Israelis might choose to criticise.
And this is what is so beautiful about Israel. And I think this is the main problem of the BDS movement and Ken Loach specifically, because the BDS approach is it completely opposes Israel for anything and everything. They're not even willing to hear the different opinions that Israeli people are saying. Israeli people contradict some of the data of the government, some of its ideas and philosophy, and this is right and this is fair. Everybody is allowed to have an opinion, not when your opinion is to completely oppose the very country. And this is what we think is the main agenda of the BDS in general, because I'm not afraid of anyone visiting Israel and see it for him or herself. I'm not scared of that. I'm not scared of showing them the multicultural cities where Jews and Muslims and Christians and Druze and Baha'is and everyone else live together. This is probably the only country in the Middle East today where the Christian community is prospering and growing. I'm not scared of showing them the Arab communities, not in Jerusalem, not in other parts of the countries. And again, there's no itinerary. People who'd like to come on a first-class visit, on a second-class visit, on a boat trip, whatever, they would get to see what they'd like to see.
But it's not a lie to talk about the fact that there is an illegal occupation of the West Bank under international law, that many of the settlements have been declared as being illegal by the UN. Those are not lies. They are serious objections to Israel's actions. And somebody like Ken Loach would say that actually the pressure that was put on a state like South Africa under apartheid worked to help to bring an end to apartheid. Perhaps by bringing pressure like this to bear on Israel, you bring an end to some of the things that people see are the excesses of that state.
I understand what you're saying. I don't think there is a similarity. It is not parallel. I don't think you can compare between the two. Israeli Arab live in Israel and they work in Israel. Palestinian living in the occupied territories, the situation again is different. I would like to point out one BDS campaign that was a big success for BDS but a big loss for the Palestinian community. And this is the campaign for SodaStream, for example, because they've closed their plant. They were based in the West Bank. And because of the BDS, the Israeli plant had to close it down. 600 Palestinian employees had to be sent home. Their families lost their income. And frankly, if there's anything that jeopardized the economy of the Palestinians, is the BDS more than anything else. This is why the head of the Palestinian Authority, Mahmoud Abbas, actually opposes BDS. But BDS's people, same as Ken Loach, they think they know better than anyone else. They think they know better than the Palestinian himself, what is good and what is wrong. Well, people should judge and see it for themselves. When people will be visiting Israel, they will see an open community. Everywhere you go, you can travel freely. I am talking now about the Israel-Palestinian Authority. Obviously, it's like going to another country. If you're crossing the border with another country, you would think you would go through some kind of a security. That's something completely different. But we, as a tourist board, invite people to visit and to see those very places, from Tel Aviv, which is a cosmopolitan city on the Mediterranean, to Jerusalem, the Dead Sea, and many, many other sites, and see and witness it for yourself. Don't believe me. Don't believe Ken Loach. Just see and witness it.
Naama Kaplan of the Israel Government Tourist Office.